A brick in the red wall has held. Labour have pulled off a surprise victory in the Batley and Spen by-election, which took place yesterday. It was an emotional win for Kim Leadbeater, who is the sister of the former Batley and Spen MP Joe Cox, who was brutally murdered, of course, in the constituency back in 2016.
Yes, well, Miss Leadbeater held off the Conservative candidate, Ryan Stevenson, with a majority of 323 votes. That's despite pollsters and bookies predicting otherwise. It has been somewhat of a divisive by-elections, with campaigns marred by claims of violence and intimidation, and those have particularly been aimed at Miss Leadbeater. They seem to have backfired, so clearly that strategy didn't work. And as George Galloway's attempt to oust Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, by taking Labour votes, that's failed too.
Yeah, this strangely feels like a win for Labour. A very slim one, but a welcome win for the Labour leader nevertheless. After they lost Hartlepool back in May, this was a test of Sir Keir Starmer's leadership. No doubt about that. So has he passed? Well, our political correspondent Tom Harwood is in Huddersfield. Busy night that you've had, Tom. Busy morning, seen you on all morning. It was a bit of a surprise, wasn't it? And quite an achievement in view of all the different things going on there.
Yes, it certainly was a surprise. It got to about 3 a.m. and I started to nudge some of the Labour representatives there, saying, are you looking at those piles of votes? Can you see those Labour piles of votes look quite high to me, look quite chunky. They look like they are almost matching and in some cases overtaking the Tory vote. It took some persuading of the Labour representatives there that they were actually set to do quite well and win, because of course all of the mood music for the last few weeks had been that the Tories were ahead here, that George Galloway was taking away from the Labour vote and that the Conservatives were going to sweep to victory. Well, it appears that George Galloway has actually taken away potentially some of that more Brexit-leaning vote that might have hurt the Conservatives, but also the viciousness of the campaign. And it has been a uniquely vicious by-election campaign with a lot of intimidation from certain sections of campaigners. That seems to have led people to lend their support to Kim Leadbeater, maybe out of sympathy, maybe because she seems like a genuine, nice, local girl. And that seems to be part of the story here. A lot of her support was coming actually from some of those Conservative areas, although I think talking up this victory as if it's a stonking win would be going too far. This, of course, was a seat that Labour held in 2019 with a majority of over 4,000 votes. And 2019, of course, was a nadir of Labour's electoral prospects. So to win that by an even slimmer margin in the middle of a governing term as an opposition party, it's not a great result, but it's certainly a relief for the leader of the Labour Party.
Starmer, you wouldn't read too much into this.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, not a reason to drink too much champagne if you're Keir Starmer, because it really should have been in the bag. It will be a safe seat next time round, but there's still a great big wall there that has crumbled.
That's certainly true. If we look at the last couple of months, we've seen that Hartlepool, a seat that has only ever been held by the Labour Party, fell to the Conservatives. And then the Labour Party lost their deposit in Chesham and Amersham. It has not been a great streak of wins for the Labour Party in England especially. So this is slightly welcome news for the Labour leader, and also it will allay some of those leadership challenge rumours that we've been hearing for the last couple of weeks. We've been hearing a number of people in the shadow cabinet were sort of taking soundings, gearing up to stand against Keir Starmer. Well, it looks like, at the very least, that has all been delayed. But focusing back on this by-election, this was a uniquely local by-election, and that choice of candidate, of course, the late Joe Cox's sister, Kim Leadbeater, seemed to be the absolute winning factor here, someone who was respected locally, but also had a very tough time on that campaign trail with some of the intimidation she faced. And she addressed that, actually, in her victory speech just a few hours ago. And I think we can play a little clip of what she said now.
Not going to speak for too long because I think we're all pretty tired. I know I am. It's been a gruelling few weeks, but I want to say a few thank yous. I want to say a massive thank you to Jackie Gedman, the returning officer, and her team for organising this evening, and all the staff that have been involved in doing the count tonight. I want to say a huge thank you to the police, who sadly I have needed more than ever over the last few weeks. And I want to say a huge thank you to the whole Labour Party team for the hours and the time and their commitment they've put in to supporting me and helping me to get to this fantastic result this evening. Well done for keeping up, everybody. There's way too many people to mention by name, but I do want to refer to my family and my friends who, without them, I could have not got through the last 5 years, never mind the last 5 weeks. My amazing parents and my wonderful partner. And I want to give a special shout out to my niece and nephew, who I cannot wait to hug as soon as I see them.
Kim Leadbeater's speech there, and another divisive figure that was in this race was, of course, George Galloway, and we can also play you a clip here of what he had to say. Okay, we'll play you that clip in a second. First, Tom, George Galloway, clearly a divisive figure. Some say he, was playing dirty tricks, essentially. What should we make of George Galloway's campaign? And what were the reaction to George Galloway there on the ground in Batley and Spen?
Well, he won 8,000 votes last night, so that's not to be sniffed at. It was certainly an insurgent campaign, and one that carried a decent amount of support, particularly around the Asian community, which is a large section of the Batley and Spen constituency. But also he was going after some of the working class Brexit voting constituency as well, which seemed to play dividends, although he did not get the result he wanted. He was trying to push Labour into third place, let alone the first place that they came. He ended up himself in third place and was not happy about it at all. We managed to sort of chase him out after the announcement. He was storming out of the counting centre, and we all, the press corps, sort of followed him, and he started giving this quite curious speech where it sounded like he wanted to challenge the result of the election. So I was running after him there and managed to film what he had to say, which we can show the viewers at home now.
We will apply to the courts for this election result to be set aside. There are two words that I can use in conclusion, and everyone can look them up for themselves. Phil Woolas. Phil Woolas was a Labour Member of Parliament who was expelled from Parliament and disqualified from standing in future parliamentary elections because he was found guilty of making false statements about an opponent during an election. So you'll be hearing much more of this from me directly from the horse's mouth over the next hours and days.
Tom, what's your reaction to that? Some might say he's gone a bit mad.
It certainly sounds a little bit Trumpian, doesn't it? Normally what you do when you lose an election is concede. Well, George Galloway wants to take it to the courts, wants to challenge it, and was actually demanding there at the count that there was a recount, even though that he was in third place, several thousand votes behind, and it was the Conservative Party candidate that came just a couple of hundred votes away from winning. It was George Galloway that was demanding a full recount. Curious tactics from him there, but clearly a very bitter man after that result.
Tom, thanks very much for your coverage overnight. Thanks for getting us all set for the for the by-election result over the last few weeks. Well, joining us now in the studio is Ken Livingstone, a former Labour MP and also Mayor of London for 2 consecutive elections. The first Mayor of London, Ashley, and great to have you in the studio. We'll come to the wider results, but you know George Galloway, hugely charismatic politician in his day, quite a figure of your generation. But very, very destructive. He really nearly damaged the Labour Party irretrievably in that.
We were both in Parliament together. We were always on the same side in all the rows that were going on. And I've been amazed to see him saying those sort of things. To say that the election should be cancelled is just bonkers. But it's really only up until...
You think he's gone bonkers? Do you think he's gone bonkers and he's lost the plot?
I think the trouble is, if you've been a member of Parliament and then the Labour Party kicks you out and you don't have anything much to do, you can become a bit eccentric. I mean,
Are you talking about yourself there?
Well, when I was kicked out of the Labour Party, I'd got a family to look after and all of that, so I was kept quite busy. And I carried on getting stuff in media interviews and things like that. But literally, I would simply say to George, don't keep throwing yourself into crucial by-elections like this, because we all thought Labour was going to lose. We've been amazed it hasn't. But if George Galloway hadn't taken away so many Labour votes, this would have been a comfortable landslide.
How much should we read into this? It's not a great achievement in the end to hang on to a safe Labour seat at a time like this against a Conservative Prime Minister like Boris Johnson, who you know well from sparring with him in London. Is Keir Starmer still on borrowed time?
Oh, no. I mean, I've always been completely committed to Keir Starmer. He will be an incredibly competent Prime Minister, because he didn't come into politics to be a celebrity and be on the telly. He came in to improve the lives of people in this country. And literally, our politics now has become so much more about celebrity nonsense and so on. But the truth is, you look at Boris Johnson, he has so mishandled this crisis with the virus. Totally incompetent. And not just him, Matt Hancock and all the others. We need a competent government that has a 20-year plan, rebuild our economy, create better jobs, build some council housing so we don't have all these homeless people on the streets. There's so much we can do. And that's what Keir Starmer's about. I mean, one thing that impressed me about Keir Starmer was the moment he got selected to stand for Parliament, virtually the first thing he did, came to see me, seek my advice. That man is genuinely Labour, and it will be, I think, the best Labour government we might have seen since 1945.
But it's not cutting through to voters. He is still, in the polls behind Boris Johnson by quite a margin. So why is he not cutting through to voters? Because, you speak very highly of him. Clearly that's not something a lot of voters are seeing. Or maybe they think perhaps he's too dull and they actually quite like the fanfare and the chaoticness of the chaos of Boris Johnson.
Well, if you actually look back, Boris Johnson defeated me, but then in his 8 years as mayor did virtually nothing.
But he beat you twice, so what has Kim got that Ken doesn't? Well, how could Kim beat Boris, but Ken couldn't?
Because by the time we hit the next general election, in most probably in 2 years, this country will be in such a mess, and people won't be so concerned about, I want a Prime Minister I'd like to have a drink with in a pub. They want a Prime Minister who's going to sort out the mess we're in. Because literally, if you look back, inequality in our country has gone back to a level we haven't seen since 1914, at the start of World War I. Almost all the wealth in our country is going to the tiny little elite, the 1/10 of 1% at the top. And about half the population is getting poorer and poorer all
And the
time.
conclusion that working class people across the north of England came to at the last general election was the best people to get them out of that was not the Labour Party and not the Islington kind of leaders that you support and advocate, but Boris Johnson, for better or worse.
But now once people have seen how Boris manages it, they'll take a different view. I think the real problem we saw was Labour needed to go into a general election with a clear list of all the things we're going to do. But we didn't. It's all, the personal attacks and stuff like that. We've got to get it right if we're going to win. But I think under Keir Starmer, we will get it right.
I think we can actually show Keir Starmer's tweet. He tweeted, we're going to show you it in a sec. This was his reaction. Fantastic result for the brilliant and brave Kim Leadbeater. Kim ran a positive campaign of hope in the face of division. She will be an outstanding Labour MP for Batley and Spen. Clearly, obviously, he's quite pleased that this happened, because people were saying this could have meant a potential leadership election if he was to lose.
You had all these predictions we were going to lose, all the talk about there'll be a challenge to his leadership and all of that. And that's all over now. And anyhow, you can't challenge a sitting leader unless you get nominated by 40 Labour MPs. That's not going to happen.
But if he'd lost that, it would have happened, eh? And he missed it by 300 votes. The 300 votes between him and oblivion.
Even if we'd narrowly lost it, I'm not certain that would have allowed them to trigger a campaign, because what's the alternative? I mean, that's the situation. Can you see anyone on Labour's front bench that looks like they'll be doing better?
But that's a damning indictment, is it not, of the current state of the Labour Party?
It is out, literally. I think back to the politics of, when I first got involved in it, it was all filled with people who'd come in, Labour and Tory. I mean, I followed John Major onto Lambeth Council. He came on to build more council housing. You can't imagine a Tory Prime Minister wanting to do that now. It's been a disaster. And so literally, we've got to get it right. I do think that over the last few years, we haven't done that.
And what do you make of a lot... one of the reasons, and it will be important to a lot of working class people, is they feel that Labour almost talk down to them. They have a strong sense of cultural identity. They have a strong sense of patriotism in many of these communities. And one of the reasons they feel Labour's no longer representing them as much as they used to is because they sort of feel like they're talked down to, and they're sneered at for being patriotic and things like that. What do you make of that analysis?
Well, I think the last general election, Jeremy Corbyn didn't get it right, and that's why we had such a bad result. But Keir Starmer...
In what way? What did he do wrong? Was it that he was preoccupied with issues that really didn't resonate with people?
I think you're
ordinary working class people. He was talking about the kind of stuff that is talked about at dinner parties in Islington, not in the pub in sort of Doncaster.
I think you're absolutely right. That's what we got wrong. Keir Starmer sees that. He's not going to make those mistakes again, because literally... Boris could get away with it because he comes over as a celebrity. He hadn't been Prime Minister for terribly long. But by the time we hit that next election, people will be judging, what has he achieved?
And he would say the vaccination programme, keeping his promises. He said he'd leave the European Union, for better or worse, whichever side of that debate you're on.
He's not responsible for the vaccination problem. That is our NHS, that's our doctors that have got all that right.
Somebody had to sort of hand over the blank chequebook to...
But that's all.
And support and coordinate and roll it out. You can't take the rough without the smooth, or the other way around.
You can. The key in any government is getting the economy right. If you don't get the economy right, we're slipping behind. And we've been slipping behind for decades, And virtually every year, we're slipping behind rival nations. We've got to get proper growth in our economy, and that's based on investment. Our level of investment is pathetic compared with, say, Germany or France. Germany's still, their economy is growing more strongly than ours. We're overtaken by one country after another virtually every year.
So how keen are you now to get us out of lockdown, to sort of urge workers to get back into the office and start getting this engine of growth purring again? Because the noises from the left invariably is stay at home, get more furlough, extend the scheme, no need to go back to the office.
The simple fact here is it's not the views of politicians that matter, it's the scientists who advise. When scientists say to us, right, you can end the lockdown, then we should do it. But until then, we shouldn't. You look at the huge surge of new cases we're now getting. Really
not
dramatic.
Of deaths. There's cases, not of deaths. It's like a bad cold. I know people who have it.
We've had a very good... 80% of us have had one dose, 60% of us have had both doses. That's why the death toll is down dramatically. But still the cases are surging. And the real danger here is viruses can mutate and change. And it could suddenly develop as a much more dangerous one. Now, we're all hoping that doesn't happen. But that's why this might go on for the rest of our lives. This could become like flu. Just come back every winter with a slightly different version. And we don't know yet. Hopefully, it'll be wonderful if we can get rid of it, but it might be we have to live with it for the rest of our lives.
And final thoughts are on the candidate who won, of course, Kim Leadbeater, their sister of Jo Cox.
Oh, she's wonderful. And I think that really helps. She has come in, like her sister did, to serve her local community. She connected with them well. She doesn't just want to be a celebrity and earn a lot of money. She wants to make life better for the people in her constituency.